Okay, hi everyone, so I'm Smithy Q, and we're going to go over my third OTP game at the Concordia Spring Classic. It was a fun one. Before we do that, just sort of as a bit of a foreshadowing, I want to show the end of a Blitz game. I played this about 4 years ago, and I think we'll see why near the end. Anyway, in this position, just for context, I've been up a piece most of the game, but I really wasted my time. I've got about 15 seconds left on the clock. My opponent's got a minute, and so I've got to do something drastic. I ended up playing bishop f3. Let's put on the board. There we go. Just targeting g2. My opponent doesn't want to take, of course, because that'd be a fork with the knight. So he plays g3. That allows this little funny thing. Queen comes in. It looks really scary. He takes here. And then this here was one of my most favorite tactical motifs here, is I throw the rook all the way down here to e1. Fantastic. Rook can be completely taken, but it actually can't. If you take with the queen, obviously, we lose g2. Okay. If you take with the knight, well, now it's going to be mate on h1 instead. Oh, crap. And so my opponent, he ends up playing bishop goes to d2, but I can take on g2 with check anyway because the queen is pinned. So I just absolutely love this rook coming in is completely free. It does two things. It's distracting the queen away from the defense, but it's also pinning the queen. So that way this is a real threat. I find that so aesthetic. It makes me really happy. Even though obviously, you know, taking on G2 is equally good. We're threatening mate here, and after capture, like this is really, really simple. But I don't think it's near as aesthetic as simply throwing the rook down all the way there. So this may or may not be foreshadowing for my game today. Now just for heads up, you can perhaps already hear it just in my voice. I've been fighting a cold for the last little bit, a lot of fun, completely stuffed up. And the day of the game, I wasn't even sure if I was going to go. It was, it was really low energy, but, well, I did. And then it turned out there were other people, I guess, maybe we were sick as well. I was supposed to play black against a different opponent, but there was a rearrangement, and all of a sudden, here I'm going to play white. All right, whatever. E4, let's go. And my opponent plays g6. And after d4, bishop g7, knight c3, d6, we're going to get into this very classic structure. Black is playing a Pirc, or a modern, I suppose. After the next moves, bishop e3, knight f6, it does officially become the Pirc defense. And the idea here is very, very standard. We're going to play queen d2, just like Fischer. We're going to castle. We're going to throw the pawns. And we're going to try and checkmate the black king. That's the idea. I play with queen d2 and bishop b3. Often we play f3 first, because that stops the knight g4 ideas. It's probably all the same either way. I'm not too worried about this, because are you just going to like chase me all the way here, and now f4 and h4 are going to open things up. Much more simple. In fact, f4 and then e5. My bishop is now staring through into the center. King side's a bit weak. I think this is unpleasant for black. And in either case, black didn't do it. Black played c6, I castled, and then he castled. Which, it's funny, the computer almost considers this a mistake. The eval jumps up to about 1 for white, and it stays there for most of the next little bit. It'd be interesting to see if black were perhaps to keep the king in the center for a little bit, and perhaps do this or this, and then just try and start the attack on my king immediately, because it doesn't make sense for me to play h4, h5, g4, g5, and open up the king side if the black king is still in the center, or maybe even goes queen side, right? So by castling, essentially, he's giving me a target. And I'm just going to lock in on that. I play f3, b5, h4, h5. Pretty standard. I throw the pawn up, he's going to stop it forever. And it's here, again, I just sort of like to back up. I want to explain, of course, my thought process throughout these games. And it's a little bit hard because I spent most of the game not thinking. I know that sounds hilarious. But it was as if, again, a little bit tired, a little bit sick, or coming back from being sick, the brain wasn't working 100%. And so I was something like g4 here, just going in immediately, trying to open things up. It scores extraordinarily well in Blitz. The computer says, after this, like, white is practically winning if black were to enter this variation. But it's hard and it's messy, and you can imagine something like this. Computer says black is done, but I mean, it's a little bit scary. You can imagine something like this. Here's the computer line. Sure, at the very least, we can take here and pick up there, but I'm down a whole bunch of material right now for a speculative attack where the next few moves after the obvious moves, sorry, they're not completely obvious. And I just couldn't calculate any of this. I just could not. My head wasn't there. And so I did sort of the next best thing is I said, let's improve my position to the point where g4 is more obvious, shall we say, where I don't need to calculate as much. Um, so I ended up playing bishop h6. And the central idea, of course, is this bishop is the best defender to the black king. And so if we exchange bishops, then he's lost the best defender. And then if we open up these files, good things will happen. Also, this bishop is a really good attacker against my king, and so it just seemed, let's trade it off. Computer says this is not the best move, but the eval is still pretty good, so that's fine. Opponent plays b4, and I took the opportunity to take on g7 immediately. Simply because let's just imagine black did something like this. Moves it back, maybe takes, I don't know, king, queen, doesn't matter. Let's go queen. And so sure, I'm up to the exchange, but black is going to do this and this, maybe this. He's going to get that pressure on the queen side. And as long as his bishop's there, it's actually really hard to checkmate black, even with a completely open h-file, just because everything stays protected. And so I just forever prevent that. I take. Obviously, he doesn't want to do this because after here, he's in trouble. Goes back here, just take. Yeah, this is completely game over. And so he has to take back, and now I move my knight. And now here, I think my opponent ends up making a mistake. He ends up playing a5, when I think queen a5 is the better move, in retrospect. Attacking here, forcing me to spend a tempo with my king to move it over, and then continue with his attack. By playing a5, it makes a lot of sense, right? We want to, just like me, I'm spending my pawns over here, trying to open lines. Black wants to spend his pawns, throw them down, open lines. But it's still several moves away before there's any real threats, and I don't have to react. I can do something. What's the best move? The best move is probably g4. Peter really likes that. I played knight f4, which is it's around the same eval. But to me, this just makes so much more sense. Again, with g4, I've got to calculate take, I got to calculate not take, I got to calculate maybe he just defends. I don't even know if g4 is actually a real threat at the real moment. By playing knight f4, I'm improving my knight. My knight is now, if I can draw the arrows better, is now targeting some of these things. Again, for example, let's just imagine like black does something. Take, black can always just recapture with this knight, and the h-file is closed. Once I bring the knight here, now he doesn't have the knight takes h5, because I'm just going to recapture, and we're going to open up some files here. There's definitely going to be files opened up, and it'd be trading off, again, just about the last defender of the king. It opens up this bishop. It just makes like a really good move. So again, when it came down to, do I calculate g4 and whether it works? Or do I just play a move to make my piece better? I defaulted to that. My opponent then played knight a6. After the game, he thought that bishop a6 would have been better, because now after exchange, the knight has simply developed there, like, basically for free. He's won time compared to what we'll see in the game. The downside to this approach is that now g4 makes a heck of a lot more sense because there's no extra bishop coming over here. And after it takes, again, h5, the computer is saying that white has a near-winning advantage. Again, the white attack is coming very quickly. Black is still very far away from actually doing anything over here on the queen side. So that's good. Regardless, my opponent played knight a6, and then I took the opportunity to play bishop c4. My opponent actually was really, really worried about the following line. He played knight c7, and he was worried that I was going to do something like take, and then take. With queen coming in, g5, maybe something like that, and just having a really big, powerful attack. This didn't cross my mind at all. Peter says it's not good. But again, just these ideas, this calculation was so foreign to me. I couldn't be bothered to do that. Honestly, why did I play bishop c4? I played bishop c4 because my bishop wasn't doing anything. And this is going to allow my rook to slide over to, it's closer to sliding over to the g file. Really, really simple. That was all. My opponent plays, the knight goes back. Then I play knight h3. So again, does g4 make some sense? G4 makes a lot of sense. But simply playing, knight goes to h3, and then watch what happens. Now the bishop goes, take, he takes back with the rook. And this is what I mean, sorry, what we discussed after the game. He ended up playing knight here, and then bishop here. And he could have simply, backing up, he could have just played the bishop here immediately, right? And so he'd not have to spend all this time. Because he spent this time, knight goes there, knight goes back, then bishop goes out, take, take. This is a lot of time where my opponent attack hasn't increased at all. And then after knight goes to g5, we see what I have done. I have managed to improve my knights to their two best squares. And now maybe there's sacrifices here or here or here. This e6 square is really, really juicy. And I spent, when I was calculating, some time trying to see, could I get knight e6 to work? Because, for example, if he were to like move his knight somewhere, now all of a sudden knight e6 is just, it's a fork. Sure, you can take. I'm going to take right back, and I've won the game. And so there's possibilities. Maybe I can coerce that knight to move. For example, maybe I could play queen goes to d3, and then just take the rook, because after he takes back, I've got this check. Maybe those are ideas that are hanging in the air. And all this has happened because I managed to take my knights and move them to really nice aggressive squares. My opponent then plays queen goes to c8, sidestepping any of that e6 stuff. Also defending that rook. After the game, he said he was alive to both of those ideas. Which is true, it does sidestep those threats, if you want to call those threats. But again, we can notice how black's attack is just going nowhere. There's no threats. Now at this point, I don't think there is any move I can do except for g4. Does anything else make sense? Look, before I could finish developing my pieces, before I could move my pieces to their best squares, but now every piece is on their best square. I mean, if I could magically pick my pieces up and move them anywhere, I think I'd probably put them right here. And so the only thing left to do is to open lines for these rooks. Let's get, throw in g4. My opponent took. After a small think, I played h5 absolutely immediately. It's always the idea. Open up lines. And then he played e5. This is kind of interesting. So here, I do have to calculate. The idea makes a great sense, right? His idea, let's move this knight away, and then he can capture without my knight being there, right? I, again, wasn't really calculating as much as I perhaps should have. I was mostly looking at this and saying, well, if I take, after recaptures, the d file is completely open up. That has to be better for me. Okay, that's what I did. Now what? I really wanted to play queen goes to d6. This was my move. With the idea that if you were to take, really, really simple, h6, it's check, king moves somewhere, I take, that's me. Done. Okay. So he can't take this knight. If he can't take this knight, well, we got threats here. Again, the threat is still to play h6 and then just win that knight. E-pawn is hanging. What do you do? And the reason I stopped is because I saw c5. The rook is defended, and the rook x-rays over here, and so the rook's coming in. And honestly, I just plain missed that I had queen takes e5 in response, still with a really vicious attack coming on in. This was the best play by computer. I played also a pretty good move. I just retreated the knight back to d3, so now the knight is attacking this. I was also thinking maybe bringing the knight to c5, where it begins a tempo on the rook, and then we have that e6 square again. Our ideas. And then, of course, Black's whole plan, take this knight. Sorry, just again, back up. The whole reason is that he played e5 to kick this knight away. Once the knight was away, he could take. And again, that knight is trying to keep the h-file closed. but I'm just going to take, and then I'm challenged that knight. What are you going to do, Black? Are you going to play queen takes g4? Sure, you keep the knight there, but for how long? And at what price? And this is, again, I wasn't really calculating. This just looked like there had to be something here. Where does the queen go? Um, if the queen were to move, again, there's like no real good squares forward. Looks like you have to go back. Well, this is just asking for take, open g file, queen's coming in. Look how there's no defenders near the black king. We just got to move the knight somewhere. Let's go knight e6, double check. Queen goes to g5. The computer spit out this was me. I didn't see all this, but I intuitively thought he can't possibly take this with the queen. Opponent agreed. He actually calculated. He knew he couldn't take, and so he brought all the way back. And now here is where I did start thinking. At this point, I only had about 20 minutes left on the clock, and I spent half of them calculating the next bit. Knight takes e5 is the obvious move. Wins back the pawn, brings the knight to a dominant square. Um, maybe prepares something like this or this, and it's really good. But I saw something else. My lit up, and then the only thing I had to do was calculate. There's something that I've been trying to avoid the entire game. Knight e6 check. Does this work? What's the idea? If he captures, like with the knight, check, boom, mate. Okay. So the whole idea of moving this knight out of the way is so that way the queen gets access to the h-file with tempe. I don't have to waste time, bring the queen over here, because then the rook will. Sorry, if I were to do something like this, again, he's always got the rook coming over, the queen is defending it, so he's contesting the h-file. By moving the knight with check, I'm able to get to the h-file with time. Okay. Again, if he doesn't take, I could take this, but again, even simpler would be this. Doesn't matter what he does, that's checkmate. Very, very nice. Okay. So the problem is, what happens if he takes with the pawn? Because this now frees this square for the king. Okay, let's calculate. Check. Brings it over. Check. Walks it over. And it took a little bit for me to fully realize, oh crap, the d file is completely open. The king is almost in a cage. Check. Can't block like this, that's me. So he only has one move. And it was here, my visualization was fuzzy, the calculation, I'm sick, I'm tired, but this feels so close. There has to be something there. There has to be something there. And then my favorite tactical idea came to mind. Rook h8. Obviously, I could simply win the rook. That'd be very nice. If he takes, that's checkmate. If he can't move because of the pin, he can't move the king anywhere because all the other squares are controlled. What do? He played knight h7, trying to defend. Queen f7, because the rook is pinned, king is dead, and I won a very happy game. And hopefully you can see here why I shared my little blitz game at the beginning, because this rook h8 idea of pinning the rook and then preparing a really nice, cool checkmate just was really cool. Now, of course, this, again, wasn't the only idea. Knight takes g7, threatening both these squares, rook, and then rook can come in afterwards, is also mating too. But I don't think it's as pretty as just throwing the rook down and then getting this lovely final position. So, I'm really, really happy with this game. I thought it was a very practical way of playing. It helped that my opponent lost time in the beginning with that whole knight, and then bishop coming in. And actually, at the time of this game, we mentioned, we agreed that black lost time, and that just gave me all the time in the world to attack him. And that's kind of the problem. If we were to go all the way back to sort of the very beginning, what GM Shanklin says about this position is that strategically black is absolutely fine because he gets good squares for all of his pieces. Um, and the only real way to challenge sort of this idea is to go gung-ho and attack, right? And so that is, if white plays the slow strategic stuff, black is generally fine. the way to challenge this whole setup is to go nuclear, is to just attack the king. And so black has to be ready for that. And so again, black, he wasted time with this. And his attack never got going, and that let me attack him for free, and that was his downfall. And I think, in a way, that's true. But we look sort of at this critical position here at the end, right before the sacrifice. I think something else comes out as well, is just how uncoordinated Black was this entire time. This knight would have loved to be on d7 to reinforce this guy. Never happened, right? Knight never really did anything. This rook over here, the rook, if it were back on the back rank, it could help contest the h-file sooner. Instead, it's over here just being a target, not really doing anything. Queen kind of hanging around. None of Black's pieces are working together in any way. And I think that shows how little counterplay Black had, never really had a chance because the coordination wasn't there. Whereas we can see with White, again, this entire time I had my pieces on good squares. I've got the H file, I've got the D file, and everything is working in the final attack. Whereas nothing is quite working for Black. They're all kind of on like one square wrong, if that makes sense. So great game. I'm very happy with it. Um, I don't know if I could repeat that process of like ignoring calculation to mostly play positional moves and improve to prepare the like. Um, that's not a recipe for long-term success, but it worked here, and given the circumstances, I think that's the best I could do. So again, I'm now 2 for 3 at the tournament. I'm in like second or third place, something like that. So that's very good for my first tournament in like a decade. 2 rounds left. I look forward to sharing those games with you then. Otherwise, I probably need an Advil now, so I'm going to go. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.